Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Friday, very gray and drizzly Friday here in Boston, but Friday all the same. That means Friday reads. I've already watched a bunch of Friday reads in my BookTube watching today. I hope there are many more. I wish more people did Friday reads. I think a lot of times when people have a BookTube channel, especially if they have a new BookTube channel, they think, I can't do a Friday reads because I don't have anything to report. I'm still making progress on the two books I talked about last time. It, 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 that is a Friday reads. We're watching for you, not for the books. I think most of the time we're watching for you, not the books. So tell us about what you're thinking. Tell us about if you had a hard time finding the time to read those two books from last Friday. Tell us about that. For me, anyway, that would be fine by me. But I don't have that problem. I don't have the problem finding time to read. I do have a problem always having a great reading week because I'm not a mood reader. So I'm not intentionally chasing my reading experiences or in order to increase the odds that they will be good. I have mentioned many times on this channel. Some of you are new here, not many of you. That's great. We're in a stubborn holding action against ever getting to 16K, and that's good. But I've mentioned many times before that I have set my own reading world, my own reading parameters. Everybody does that. That's not just me. And mine is largely the new releases in the American book market in the 15 or 16 genres that interest me. All of them, or as many of those new releases as I can, as many as I can get. Somebody send me an e-copy or a galley copy or a finished copy or whatever. And because that's true, obviously that is dictated by the industry and the calendar, not by my interests. So I never know in any given week how good that week's reading is going to be. And I can't really consciously turn it around in any way other than to throw in some surefire bets as palate cleansers between new releases. So this has been a pretty good reading week. One glowing example that I'll get to. I want to show you some of the books that I read this week. I had a good reading week. I've had a very good reading month so far in January. January just has a week to go, less than a week to go. So far, as of 2 minutes before I hit record on this video, I have read 83 books in January, and there have been some standouts. There have been some things that I really liked. Been a lot of wasted time as well. I guess reading a bad book is not wasting time, as much as it can sometimes feel that way. But it's been a good, healthy reading month in January, and I'm expecting a lot of reading time between now and the end of the month. A lot of it. Which suits me right down to the ground. But I want to show you some of the stuff that I've been reading recently. I think maybe there might be a couple of things on here that I haven't read yet, but they're on my docket to read real soon, or rereads. So a regular old Friday reads, the exact kind of thing that for years I said, oh, well, I can't do that. I certainly can't do that. So let's start with this. We'll start with biographies. This is Andrew Stauffer. This is a new book called Byron, A Life in 10 Letters. Here, let's lower the brightness here so that you can actually see these things. Got all sorts of contrast going on here today because it's cloudy and it looks like it wants to rain. But that should fix things. Here, let's see. Oh yes, much better. Okay, and this is it's a comparatively little thing, a comparatively little short life of Byron that is about. It's orchestrated, as you can tell, by letters. Byron was a prolific letter writer. He's also a fantastic letter writer. There was a collection, I think, from Norton or maybe Yale about 5 or 6 years ago of the letters and journals of Lord Byron. If you see it ever at a sale or a remainder shop or whatever, grab it. Any letter collection of Byron. It's terrific. He really lives on the page. He lived in a golden age of people writing letters like that, and he's better than almost any of them. And this biography takes the approach of looking at his life through the lens of 10 letters, which initially struck me as pretty gimmicky, but this is pretty effective. I thought this was pretty effectively done. Did not let the side down at all. Then this next one is a reread, a long gap of time in between the original read and now. I read this when it first came out, and then I thought no more about it. I liked it. I thought no more about it, and then I was watching Thomas at SFF 180, the BookTube's best science fiction channel, in my opinion. And Thomas has created a thing on his channel that I would never have thought to do on a channel, and yet it so much works. It's one of those read with me things where he will just simply be reading on camera, and there's a live stream comment field, but he's just sitting there on his porch reading, and periodically stopping, periodically chatting with everybody. But mainly, it's just so that you can feel like you're reading with a buddy, you're reading with a friend. And boy, oh boy, is it popular on his channel. I don't think it would be popular if I did it. But the book that he was reading, ordinarily I expect him to be reading new releases in the fantasy and science fiction market. He knows all these people. He's much better plugged into that world than I am. I always expect that's what it's going to be, but it often isn't that. And the book that he was reading this time around, just yesterday, was The Dark Between the Stars by Frank Robinson. And when I saw that, I immediately went and grabbed my mass market paperback, which is seen better days. It's fairly sturdy thing. It was fairly well made, but it has been the subject of a few canine incursions over time, and also it's a mass market paperback. So you're squinting at the type and you're wrestling with the binding, unless you're brutal on the binding, and if you slip even a little, it slams closed and you have to try and find where you were and all that sort of stuff. But I reread it anyway, and then now I have an ebook of it, so I won't have to worry about that again. And this is a generation ship story. It's a sleeper ship story. It's a ship that has been sent from Earth. I don't know who did this cover. Is that Vincent Tafate? I love it. Absolutely love it. But this ship has been sent on an extraterrestrial mission. It has a captain who's immortal. It has a crew and a whole bunch of admittedly finite resources. And the voyage is taking way too long, and it doesn't look like it's going to yield anything that its original engineers thought it would. More and more of the ship needs to be shut off because it's just running down. It looks like they're on some sort of a mission that is crazed because it is more and more shaped in the fanatical tunnel vision of the captain. And our main character in this book is increasingly building momentum towards some sort of mutiny. And I've read this, The Dark Between the Stars. I read Poul Anderson's The Boat of a Million Years, and a few other generation ships that become dystopias of their own. I really liked this one. I really liked it. I was worried when I picked up the mass market paperback that it would not survive a reread. Not the paperback, but my estimation. When it's been that long, I think it's been like 40 years since this came out. When it's been that long, you worry that when you pick up a book that you liked from back then, when you've never revisited it in between, you're not going to like it at all. You're going to see its flaws and maybe feel embarrassed, even though everybody I read this with is dead. Everybody who saw me carrying this around with a crowd of beagles, they're all gone. And the beagles are all gone. So there's no reason for me to worry. Shouldn't be worried about embarrassment anyway. As I grow older, I grow wiser and sexier. That is just natural. But I didn't need to worry because this was really, really good. And totally inspired by book two. I would never have picked it off the shelf if I hadn't seen Thomas reading it. This next one is indie, and I read as much of that as I can. Of course, I read a lot of indie books that I don't tell you about for trade journals. I'm big in reviewing indie books for the trade journals, but also I like to read them on my own, and that's on my own too, I suppose. But I read this. This is called Fowler, and it's by Kathy Barton. And you can probably tell from the cover, science fiction, romancy type books are big on shapeshifters. I don't know quite why that is, but it is phenomenally popular. And in this case, I knew that this was a dragon shifter story, and I kind of assumed what I was going to get, that the gigantic pected young himbo would be the dragon shifter. But the book starts off completely different from that. You are dunked into world building that doesn't have much to do with romance. It's two sisters who are extraterrestrial beings who are charged with righting wrongs in the timeline, with correcting anomalies in the timeline, and they shift their form, yes, so that they can fit in wherever they are. Their natural form is a dragon form. Uh, and when the book opens, they are hunting a well-known uh, temporal mechanic scofflaw that they need to bring to justice. But gradually, it's a little bit over the top, and it's not particularly well written. At least it wasn't at the beginning of the book. It wasn't probably the first 50 pages. It wasn't particularly well written. But the thing that kept me reading was the world building, which starts off a little primary color, a little bit, kids building blocks. The type of feeling that you get in a lot of these science fiction, blue alien, shifter romances, where you get the impression that the author doesn't read science fiction. I kind of got that impression at the beginning of this book, but it started to steadily go away. It was the world building that kept me reading in this thing, not the fairly ham-handed romance that develops at about page 100. It was the world building that kept me going. And as is usual with indie books, I don't know if this is part of a series. This is book one. I believe this is book one. I don't know if there are more of these. I don't quite remember how this was served up to me, but now I'm curious to know. Now that this book has done exactly what indie books should do. It's actually what all books should do. In case any of you are wondering why I'm so relentlessly critical about new releases, I don't like book cheerleaders, specifically because all books should do that. Perfectly okay for you to build credit in your reading bank with an author. That's perfectly okay. That doesn't mean you don't validate their checks. That doesn't mean you don't do your due diligence. I consider all books should do that they should earn your attention and keep earning it. And if they manage to do that, and this one definitely did, Fowler definitely did, well, then there's no reason to be standoffish or coquettish anymore. That author has done their job. That author has done exactly what they should do. They have hooked you. I tend to let that be enough with indie authors. I tend to just come back to them after that. This next one is not quite a booktube inspiration. It's an Instagram inspiration. I am on Instagram. In addition to being on booktube, I'm on Instagram. I really should post every day something on Instagram. I don't, and I really should. But I follow a whole bunch of people there, including people who were once on booktube and now barely make an appearance at all. Jason Harrigan is one of those. He made a comeback video, and I'm sure that's the last we'll see of him for another year or two, when he renames his channel and comes back for the 50th time. But he's an ardent bibliophile on the west coast of Ireland. And he keeps up a presence on Instagram, even though he's not on booktube, and often shares pictures of what he's currently reading. And I saw him post a picture of this thing, and I thought the same thing as with The Dark Between the Stars. I thought, get up, go over to the shelf, pull down your copy, and give it a reread. Only in this case, I've reread it a couple of times. I'm not the biggest fan of this book. And I know that it has ardent fans, hugely devoted fans. So I always think that I'm missing something. This is Alan Moore's book, From Hell. His big, static graphic novel about Jack the Ripper. And actually, the cover gives away what Moore largely thinks is the whodunit solution to Jack the Ripper. But you won't know that unless you already know. The cover's for those who know. This goes through the whole story of Jack the Ripper in enormous detail. And it is good. It is really good. I'm always fascinated by it. Every time I read it, I'm fascinated by it. I don't know what it is that just doesn't gel with me. And I actually don't know from Jason's post if it gels with him either. He's a big ripperologist, same as I am. He's a big fan of the subject. Maybe he likes this more than I do. And if he does, I should ask him how, because he knows the subject. So maybe he can give me a way. It didn't work with me. I found no flaws. I didn't say, oh, that was wasted time. I read it. I reread it from front to back, paid close attention, found a few things that I hadn't found before. Never quite gelled with me as magic in the way that it has for so many people who love this book, but I strongly recommend it. Even so, I just need to, I probably need to ask Jason a few questions about what it is that he's looking for or finding in that book. Then we have Vintage Mystery. This wasn't suggested by anything, although March Mystery Madness is literally right around the corner. This is just, well, actually it was suggested by something, because a few booktubers are reading more and more Agatha Christie. I've read a lot of Agatha Christie. I don't think anyone's ever read it all, but I've read a huge amount of Agatha Christie, hundreds of things, and reread a lot of those things. And she is a weird author where the more I reread her over the decades, the less I tend to like her. The more I tend to see how contrived a lot of her books are, how artificial a lot of her books are, and especially how mean-spirited a lot of her books are. I don't mean the characters, I mean the author. I know I shouldn't care about such things, but I remember distinctly when this started. I found an old mass market paperback of Lord Edgware Dies years and years ago, before we were talking to each other, before book 2. And I thought, oh, isn't that pleasant? It's a neat cover. It's a neat edition. I hadn't read an Agatha Christie book in years. Picked it up and read it and thought, ugh. And I was a little shocked at that. And for a long time after that, I was wary of myself, thinking, you probably read it, at a bad time. Maybe it was sandwiched between 2 bad new releases or whatever. It's Agatha Christie, for Pete's sake. How can that be your reaction? But every time I've gone back to her since then, I've had that same reaction until now. I've watched that reaction and versions of it on BookTube. Also, people that just love her. That's by far the most common approach. I don't want to let go. I want to know if maybe that reaction is just a chain reaction. So I picked up Mr. Parker Pyne Detective, which is neither Hercule Poirot nor Jane Marple. It's Parker Pyne who is converting a lifetime of experience compounding records in a non-police capacity into a bottomless knowledge of why people do what they do. So he puts an ad in the paper saying, "Are you happy? If not, consult Parker Pyne." And I really, really liked it. I don't remember liking any Parker Pyne novels. I'm pretty sure I've read all of them. I don't remember liking them this way at all. Parker Pyne is basically Nero Wolfe, only with personality. You Nero Wolfe fans are going to raise up the torches and pitchforks, but he is so different from either Jane Marple or Hercule Poirot. He's so different from either one of them. I don't know why he hasn't caught on. Christie is known for those 2 figures and not for him. This is a collection of short stories, and I just loved it. I just had a blast the whole time. Okay, then this next one is a new release. This will be coming out well down the pike. I don't think it's available even in galleys. But boy, oh boy, does it strike close to home. This is a book called In the Company of Art. It is a collection with a lot of bridging material, very good introduction, very good bridging material. This won't just give you it cold. But it is a collection of excerpts from the journal of Perry Rathbone, who for a long time was the director of the Museum of Fine Arts here in Boston. And he was a legendary director. Some directors come and go. They barely make an imprint on anything at all. Perry was legendary. He had a lot of experience when he came to Boston already. So he wasn't finding his way, but he definitely wanted to change the MFA. And he did. He succeeded in changing the MFA enormously. And had a grand time doing it. And every day, he kept a journal. Same as I do, same as I hope you do, the same as everybody should. He kept a journal. And the journal wasn't for the public, it wasn't for public consumption, and it also wasn't particularly structured. He gave a lot of structure to his day in a lot of different ways. So when it came time for him to open his journal and write, it was far more episodic and emotional than that. And also a lot more catty. so the things, decisions, impressions, opinions, the urbane Perry Rathbone that you meet in the galleries of the MFA, you would never suspect that such ideas cross his mind. It was wonderful. Absolutely enchanting. It's In the Company of Art. There is himself. This is, I don't know how many of you have ever been to the Museum of Fine Arts here in Boston. It is one of, if I were to make, if you were to come in Boston, I would say, you would tell me, what are 5 things I should definitely see? The MFA, of course, would be on that 5-item list. Of course it would be. One of the neat things is that another thing on that list, right across the street from the MFA, is the Gardner Museum, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, which is an art museum of a very different kind than the MFA, but equally unmissable. You just can't miss either one of these things. Of course, I would also be on that list. Right. Coming here to Hyde Cottage for wine and calzones while Frida screams at you would be on that list. but when you go to the MFA, you are so much seeing still a creation of Perry Rathbone. So much. I don't know what kind of coverage this book will get. It's very well done. I don't know what kind of coverage it will get I unfortunately, Boston doesn't have a very robust book reviewing world of its own. The Boston Globe doesn't do many book reviews. The Christian Science Monitor doesn't do many book reviews. The Boston Herald does, I think, no book reviews. The Boston Phoenix is gone, unfortunately, so you don't have that huge art section in the back of the Phoenix. Uh, I think there's a Boston Literary Review, but I don't know anybody there. I don't know if there even is one anymore. I don't know what kind of press this will get, unless it gets press in New York, which it easily could. So I very much enjoyed that, but that's not available to you yet. Then we have a big reread. I found a mass market copy of this book at the Brattle, I think, last year, I think, and it was just sitting there on the shelf, and I was putting something away. It might have been Parker Pine, because I started reading Parker Pine Detective in a mass market paperback. It might have been that I was putting that mass market paperback away, and I saw another mass market paperback. They're all together in one place here, and thought, you didn't get that just to chuck it somewhere. You should reread it. So for the first time in 30 years, I sat down and reread Leon Uris's novel Trinity, which is about a big chunk of 20th century Irish history. It follows a group of characters. This was a huge hit when it first came out. I read it when it first came out and did not see why. It struck me so much as maundering wetwash for so much of its length. I admit, this author largely strikes me that way, so maybe I'm missing something, because certainly in his heyday he was incredibly popular. I thought there are sections here that concentrate a lot on Donegal, and those sections I thought were much better than the Belfast sections or anything else, or the interplay between the two. An uneven book, in other words, I guess, is a really interesting, that's a really original critical appraisal. I thought this was uneven. All I could think about when I was like 300, 400 pages in, I'm okay. So your unhappy character number 112. What was your story again? It was forever ago that I read it. When I was that far in, all I could think about was I wasn't thinking about the book at that point. I don't think I gave Trinity the reread that it deserves. Because at that point, for the last 200 pages of the book, I wasn't thinking about the book. Instead, I was thinking about the editor. He had to have had an editor. And all I could think was, what was going on there with you? Why are you letting him do this? Why? And I don't know the etiology of this book. It could be that this was 3 times as long before that editor got his hands on it. Maybe that editor did do the job. And the irony is, of course, that editor would be faded from one end of Manhattan to the other as soon as this thing was on the New York Times bestseller list, and this camped on the New York Times bestseller list. So that's never going to be, maybe in private memoirs, that editor might say that this was a bit of a failure. I probably should have trimmed 200 pages off this. But they'll never say it in public, and the public will never say it. You had a hit. I didn't see it. It didn't work for me. I've read so much. I almost think there's a curse. When mainstream writers write about the events in Ireland in the first 30 years of the 20th century, I almost think there's a curse. Because I see good writers that I really like, will attempt that, and it defeats them. Morgan Llewellyn attempted that in a few novels, and those novels were popular, just like Trinity was popular, but they're dead on the page, just dead. Same thing with Thomas Flanagan. I know I'm supposed to love Thomas Flanagan, but no, no, not at all. I swear. The writer I've seen treat some of this stuff better than any other is William Martin, the author of Back Bay and Cape Cod. And I'm not being biased here, but I honestly do think that his novel The Rising of the Moon does a better job at a lot of this stuff than most of the books that are solely devoted to that. So this was it was a blah reread, and it was not alone. There was another blah reread that was on this list, and it was this. I don't know what prompted this. I reread The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. No idea why. No idea why. I read this when it was the hit of the world in the, what was it, the 1990s? The mid 1980s. I read this when it didn't look like this. The trade paperback that I'm sure you remember if you're of a certain age. I read that, and then I read it again. Every young reader that I knew that never reads anything was reading the book and talking about it, and I didn't see anything at all to talk about. And at the time, I was thinking, boy, oh boy, don't you wish you were still reviewing books? And then I read it again. Years later. and didn't do anything for me at all. You would think that that would mean the book was closed. I don't intend to read everything that Kundera ever wrote. I don't intend to do any kind of a systematic reread. I don't know why this propped up. I don't know why this cropped up for me to reread, but I did. And I think probably I'm a little more appreciative of some of the things that Kundera is trying to get at here. Certainly I'm not any more appreciative of the things that he's actually doing. Bloated, lachrymose prose, horrible, just sticky, humid ruminations on things, and you know they're coming. It's awful. It's like the urge to vomit. You know that it's coming, and you can't avoid it. Where a character will be two insufferable characters will be wandering on about love, and you know that at some point the author is just going to go off, and suddenly you're going to get 4 pages about love without anyone saying them. It's just going to be the book. This may very well be the most boring prog novel that was ever written. Well, I don't know what it is about it. I know it has ardent fans. It's never going to do it for me. I really don't think I'm going to reread the Unbearable Lightness of Being again. Even for a 28-year-old, life is too short. But I also got a new release from the New York Review of Books, the great folks at the New York Review of Books. I don't usually agree with a lot of what they do, but I love that they're out there. I love that they're doing it. And they came out with a book called, or maybe they're coming out, this might not be out yet. This is called The Unforgivable and Other Writings by Cristina Campo. Who, again, much like I mentioned with, who was it that I mentioned it with? I mentioned just recently that, Boccaccio. It was Boccaccio that I did. I mentioned that Boccaccio was not technically born in Florence, but he's very much a Florentine author. And the same thing is true with Cristina Campo. She was I don't think she was born in Florence, but she's very much a Florentine author. And this is her ruminations on things. Essays, book essays, criticism of various things, essays that are worth the term. These are translated. I don't think she wrote much in her life. I actually don't know that much about her. She's been dead for a long time. And somebody at the New York Review of Books wanted her work to be in a new edition. How lovely. How wonderful is that they continue to do that? Ordinarily, wide misses from what I like. But in this case, I don't think I would ever have picked this up. But it was a good choice. It was a terrific reading experience. So there you go. They know best, I guess. Then this thing was nuclear. This thing leapt out. This is an author that has unbelievable amounts of credit in the Bank of Steve. He can do no wrong. I knew that anyway. He has a new book. I'm not sure that it's out yet, but it's a collection of pieces, and it is brilliant. Just brilliant. The kind of brilliant that is so rare in the new release reading world, where it makes you want to grab the next reader that you meet and shove it into their hands. And I would do that if I ever put on pants and left the fainting couch. But since I don't, you're elected. This is the author Rick Bass, who I've praised many times before on this channel. I've praised his book, The Black Rhinos of Namibia. I praised his book, Coulter. And this is a new book of his. It's a collection of pieces called With Every Great Breath. And it's incredible. Just incredible. Each of the pieces in here is a universe unto itself, full of some of the best, most heartfelt, most eloquent prose you're going to read all year. I was prepared, and I was still blown away. And then I got to one particular piece in this book, which is called 15 Dogs. And it's him writing about dead dogs. His dead dogs. I knew already that this author is great when writing about dogs. His book Coulter is the best book I've ever read about a dog. I've read a whole lot of them. Nothing prepared me for the power of 15 Dogs. Nothing did. But there are great pieces here on so much. Oh, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Really want a hardcover print and paper copy of this thing. I really don't want to settle for just an ebook. Then this thing was a reread. The next one was a reread. It's been on this channel many, many times. It's Wolves of Winter by the historian Dan Jones, who has turned his hand to historical fiction with phenomenal success. the first book he wrote was about a ragtag bunch of English mercenaries who are shipped off to France in the Hundred Years' War, uh, and fight at the Battle of Crécy. And that was called Essex Dogs. I read it. I wrote about it. I read the advanced copy, read the finished copy when it came out. I did actually read along, a buddy read with Micah Cummins, who used to have a BookTube channel. And this is the sequel to Essex Dogs. Now, when we were doing that buddy read, Micah and myself, I pointed out some of the weaknesses here. I shouldn't have called them weaknesses. They aren't weaknesses because they are clearly completely under the author's control. They aren't weaknesses so much as they are market choices. He is writing this for a very specific historical readership group, and it's not really much of an overlap with Hilary Mantel's readers. Let's just put it that way. This is what used to be referred to as boys' fiction. This is action-adventure historical fiction. He is making a very conscious decision to eliminate the anachronisms, the historical, or rather to import bucket loads of historical anachronisms. And it's a very conscious decision on his part. Unlike, I wouldn't ordinarily say that with a lot of historical novelists. I would say you're just ignorant. You're not thinking what things are the same now or what things are different then. But Dan Jones knows history. So all the anachronisms in this book, and they are on every page, have to be intentional. And I love that. Once I know that, then I'm free to go along with what the author wants to do. And what Dan Jones wants to do in these pages is very much not faithfully recreate the inner and outer world of his characters at the time. Almost 1,000 years ago. He very much does not want to do that. He wants to do something else instead. I think he probably wants to get at the shared immediate humanity that is definitely the same now and then. And it works. It absolutely works. You shouldn't read this book if you haven't read Essex Dogs. But you should read Essex Dogs, so it's no harm. And thanks to its success, your library will probably have Essex Dogs. And you should definitely get this. You're going to want to follow these. I think this is going to be a trilogy. You're definitely going to, once you get hooked, and I believe Essex Dogs will hook you, you're going to want to keep going. Definitely. I have a commissioned a review of this for Big Canoe News in Northern Georgia. That'll be appearing in our February issue. And I wanted to reread it because I'm going to write about it myself, and I loved it. I loved it. I am done quibbling with this author. He knows what he wants to do. It's a conscious decision on his part, so so I loved it. I might also point out, that Hilary Mantel, for instance, also makes conscious decisions in her Wolf Hall trilogy. Very much so. She admits it herself. She's admitted it in interviews. She's admitted it in print. If you know the period of the time period in King Henry VIII's reign and the King's Council, for instance, or a particular conversation that's had in a particular room, and you're reading Wolf Hall or Bring Up the Bodies, if you know the time period really well, you're going to be reading that and thinking, no, you didn't say this. You didn't say this. It was the French ambassador who said this. Why are these words in your mouth? Or you're going to say, all right, the two of you are having this conversation, but there was a third person who was in that conversation. That character is not present in these books at all. He's never even mentioned. He's, in other words, conflated with a couple of other characters for fictional reasons. Well, Dan Jones does the same thing. His book is full of fictional decisions. And they're all good. They're all good. And then, I think this is the last one. Yes, this is the last one. This was served up to me by one of those ebook aggregator sites that I sign up for. I'm sure you've seen them. I don't know how much attention you pay to them, but you give them your email, which is all they want because they're bundling that and selling it. You give them your email and you get a daily blast, daily notices of the cheap and free ebooks that are available that day. The deals change on a daily basis. I think that I need not have done that. I'm pretty sure that Kobo and Kindle and Barnes & Noble, pretty sure that there's a way for you to sign up for that with them without going to an external source. But I don't know what that way is. So I signed up for all of these things. I get bombarded with notices every day. I follow a basic rule, one basic rule with all of these things, which is to totally ignore anything that has a price tag. Anything, no matter how good it looks, totally ignore it. It must be free. If it's not free, it's not for me. So I totally ignore that. So I have added, with these aggregator sites, I have sent probably I don't even know, 300 books to the Kindle app on my iPad. I've sent probably 300 books to that app in the time since I signed up. And I've read a lot of them. I haven't read them all, but the point is, if it's an ebook and it's free, what's the harm in sending it to your Kindle? It might answer a mood, be the perfect palate cleanser at exactly the right time. So I have a lot of those, and I make a point of going through them and staying relatively up to date on them. And I read one that was science fiction. This is by Al Davidson, and it's called Zero Day. It shouldn't be called Zero Day because should be a moratorium title. There have been 8 million books with the title Zero Day. And whenever I see a title like this, a hackney title like Zero Day or Reckoning or World's End or whatever, I always think, in the first 2 chapters of this book, your own text of your own novel is going to provide me with either the idea for a much better title or the actual title. And it was true here too. It was in chapter 5, I think, of this thing, where I immediately saw the phrase that should be the title of this book. Instead, we get Zero Day, which is bland and boring. But the book wasn't bland and boring. Notice how good the cover is. Is that AI? Here, that we have the our himbo hero who is cybernetically enhanced, and he's being followed. This is very much a hardscrabble Blade Runner the movie type world. And it's all about the main characters, very character-focused. Main characters, he's on the wrong side of the law to begin with, and then he's quickly on the run. So you are very gradually, very skillfully doled out your exposition. One of the banes of these indie press ebook only titles is often how amateur they are. They're well-meaning, and I read them, and I like a lot of them anyway, but a lot of them, the problem is that the author has maybe a couple of friends or maybe a local writing group at the library or something like that, and so the books come to the market before they should, in a rawer shape than they should. And info dumps are infamous. They're the thing I encounter the most, is that the info dumps are all done wrong. This is the way it should be done, where you're directly inside the character's world and you are gradually made aware of the details of that world as it becomes necessary in the course of the character's adventures. That works much better. It tries the patience of the reader just a little because you're going to spend pages where you don't know what's going on. But it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. And I might add that all writers should do that. I thought this was terrific. And much like we started with, this does what it's supposed to do. I am now an Al Davidson reader. So the one problem with those aggregator sites is that you can't arrange the free books that you get by release date. As far as I know, you can't. So I don't know when this came out. I'm pretty sure it's not new. Which means that, like has happened to me many times with those aggregator sites and the good books that I find through them, this author might have 10 other books to his credit that I can go exploring in. And he's earned that. He earned that with this book. So there you go. That was a Friday Reads. Not entirely successful. there were some bright spots, definitely. Some bright spots. There were other bright spots that aren't in this Friday Reads that were part of the books that I've read in the last week. The Rick Bass was a revelation even to me when I was expecting it to be good. And the Dan Jones, I don't know what it was. Something, it never quite worked in Essex Dogs, but something in Wolves of Winter made me just say, okay. I'm being a little bit persnickety here, but he makes it clear in the afterward in the notes of this book that he knows what he's talking about. He knows the history. He's taking liberties with it intentionally in order to tell a rousing story. Okay, fine. If I can put up with that from Walter Scott, I can put up with that from Dan Jones. Once that, whatever that little resistance was, fell away, well, then I just had a blast. I just had an absolute blast. And there were a few other things I wasn't expecting to really like an Agatha Christie novel. I am now totally up to read the other Parker Pine adventures. Neither rain, nor snow, nor sleet. Anyway, that was my Friday Reads. Of course, I want to know what your Friday Reads are like. If you have a BookTube channel, feel free to make a video on the subject, but also feel free to leave a comment or send me an email. Tell me what you're reading. This is a pretty good reading week. I'm not totally objecting to it. There are 2 big things that I'm kind of waiting for. And that tends to cast a pall. The 2 big things that I'm waiting for that I don't have yet, there's one absolutely enormous thing that I have and that I'm working on. I'm actually I'm digging and rooting around with it and letting it take its time. I'm working on it, so I'm not quite done with it. I can't put it on the pile, but the reading, pretty good. Pretty good. So I will wrap this up for now, and I will do this again next Friday. So I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.